Taoiseach, thanks very much for your time. We're here to talk about the Shared Island Initiative and your policy in Northern Ireland, and some unionists, when they look at the Shared Island Initiative, are very suspicious. They think that this is some sort of Trojan horse for United Ireland. Some Republicans, when they look at this, say that it's nowhere near enough and you should be doing much more for United Ireland. Has this anything to do with the United Ireland?
No, in the sense it's not part of a political project or anything like that, and it most certainly is not a Trojan horse. It very much is grounded on the people-to-people connections. And basically, simple question, how can we share this piece of ground together in a harmonious way that gives real sustainable peace, friendliness to generations to come? Inspired very much by Seamus Mallon's sort of the book that he launched, and I remember being at a speech that he gave at the launch of the book about his Protestant neighbour whose family had been there 400 years, and he said it's about time we learned to share this space that we call home, that we both call home. So it's inspired by that. And we just saw the musicians there, and it kind of was beautiful to see for me because it kind of gave flesh to the concept. Here were musicians ostensibly from different traditions, but as I think as Gary Hastings said, it's the same well that the music came from, took different forms in different communities. And now they're together, we're putting an archive together from all those traditions. I mean, it's magic. Greater connectivity. I visited Orange Order about 2 years ago, maybe it's longer now, I think, when I was Taoiseach. And they took back their reservations on Shared Island because of the engagement I had with them, but also I think they were comfortable in pursuing projects. Because remember, this benefits the Republic as well in terms of the ideas and the research that comes out of the All-Ireland Research, for example. And it's a much freer framework than, say, the actual institutional arrangements we have. Because very often they're governed by capacity of one side or the other to fund a given project. Whereas here we're saying, look, if we think this research project between Queen's and Trinity is valuable, for all of us, the outcomes could be particularly significant, let's fund it. And if you take the vaccine on BioNTech and all of that, and find what delivered the vaccine in double quick time was collaboration on research. Now, research has always been something I've been particularly focused on as a politician, going way back to my time as Minister of Education, Health and so forth. To me, everybody benefits from good quality research, the connections that are formed through different research projects. And that's what it's about.
You were mentioning the Orange Order there. I saw Mervyn Gibson, the Orange Grand Secretary, here today. I think Ian Paisley was here today. I mean, is there significant and increased engagement with unionists around this, or do you think that there are unionists who still don't want to be involved with this because it's the Irish government?
There is increased engagement, there is significant engagement, and that's very positive. And people are coming to us with projects. And thematically, they're also getting it, in terms of some of the projects that some unionist politicians are coming to us about. It is about that idea of shared identity or shared home place or experiences across different traditions, and so that's very positive. Some are more practical in terms of greenways, which I think is a no-brainer. And we have different networks of people because I think we put people into boxes too much. We label people too much, and in a way we have to. Part of Shared Island is taking away the labels, and so say if you're interested in biodiversity or climate change and you're from a particular community, where you're from or what tradition you come from or what politics you back should have nothing to do with a shared interest in developing a biodiversity project, for example, or in developing a greenway or a road or a connectivity piece in terms of, be it narrow water bridge, what always inspired me about narrow water bridge, it was never an economic proposition. I remember meeting both chambers of commerce, I'd say maybe 20 odd years ago, but people were talking about this idea of bringing two communities together, creating a bit of economic activity, a fill-up to the local economy and so on like that. And it just was there for years, nothing happening. It nearly got there before with Interreg funding, and it fell at the last hurdle. I was deeply disappointed at that. Delighted I had the opportunity as Taoiseach to, through the Shared Island initiative, to get that underway. And so that's very much it. I mean, I see the politics evolving differently in a way, and it's also, look, through reflection myself. I mean, I gave one half of my family experience, my father's background. My mother's background was very staunch Republican. They were involved in the War of Independence and so on, and I would have been very interested in the North as a youngster, as a student, in UCC at the time. I travelled north as a student just to experience it and meet everybody, which was, when you think about it, was a big thing for some, but it shouldn't be a big thing. Do you know what I mean? I mean, that's the level of, I mean, when I spoke about the project involving Ballinasloe and Schwaffen and the craft, people say it's the first time they ever crossed the border. I mean, we have a long way to go. So the whole shared island thing is about reconciliation. That's hard work. In a way, there's a comfort zone being within political parties and saying, here's our objective, and here's our aim, and here's this, and here's that. It's much harder work to actually connect people and to do the hard work of reconciliation.
You were saying that you went to Northern Ireland as a young person, and it was a long way from Cork to Belfast then. Still pretty long way for some people. But how have your views in Northern Ireland, your understanding of Northern Ireland, shifted over the course of your lifetime?
The more fundamental change has been not to look at people from a different tradition as the other, and to seek to understand where people are coming from. So at that time, when I was a young student, I would have been brought up on, certainly, in the family tradition as being sort of the simple solution to Northern Ireland was Brits out, 32 County Ireland, that's it, done and dusted, and sure everybody will join up anyway, they'll be all happy after. And when I went to it, I mean, I was fascinated by the North because I was 8 years of age when it blew up. And so all my teenage years was bomb, bullets, terrible atrocities, watching horrific things happening on one television channel, which was RT1, which is all we had in Cork for the bulk of the 60s, late 60s and 70s. But that we actually became immune. We actually believed it would never end. I never thought I would be a minister in a government signing an agreement for peace. I actually never thought. I had to pinch myself, this is actually happening. And I think a lot of people would have been like that. So when I went, it was during the hunger strikes, and we were rather naively going to meet every youth wing of every political party in the North. I'll always remember meeting Andy Turry in the UDA, and we thought we were meeting the young UDA until a social worker on the Shankill, that Midgley, I think at the time, said to me, there was a young lad there, yeah, I said, yeah, he was security, he wasn't young. So there's a lot of learning curves, but we met social workers, we met every political party, it was fascinating. But that was the turning point for me, particularly when we met young unionists in their homes saying, how would you like it if your uncle or your dad was killed and murdered because he just happens to be wearing the wrong uniform? And how are you going to unite Ireland if that continues to happen? So that set me thinking that this is much more complex. And then as a backbench TD, I got elected. I remember doing a week in the Coromila with 12 unionist politicians, 12 from the Republic. Enda Kenny was there as a backbench TD at the time. It was funny, it was interesting. I remember David Ivan and Enda Kenny saying, you know, the Quakers wanted to put us to bed at 10 o'clock when we got up there on a Friday evening, and this was not the way the Irish do things. So someone said, any chance we could get to a pub? And that's where we ended up in the pub, and the McGinseys were there and others. And the following day, like, you know, the mythologies about each other, the perceptions we got so wrong, you know. And so that to me was all part of a journey of discovery. And then the peace process began. The British Irish Association was very influential in my thinking, going to Cambridge and Oxford once a year, meeting people from all traditions, trying to understand the complexity, what would travel, what wouldn't travel.
And that's an extraordinary journey that Northern Ireland has come on in your lifetime. If you look ahead, say, half a century, 50 years, you may be here, you may not be here, I might not be here. What sort of Northern Ireland do you want to see at that point? What's realistic for Northern Ireland in your vision of the future?
Well, my vision is very much the Wolfe Tone vision of that the people are much more comfortable in each other's skins, that there's a seamless interaction. The political configuration I'm open about. In terms of what I mean by that is it will evolve. I think politics has to work in Northern Ireland, and there has to be a sustained manifestation of politics working in Northern Ireland, so that even the politicians in Northern Ireland are comfortable with each other. And that has happened in starts and stops, or whatever, over the last number of years. Too many stops. So there needs to be a period where people engage and move things on. And then, you know, over time, you know, for example, we have energy is an all-island issue. And I think over time, let things evolve, but not in any, I don't believe in forcing people into anything. And I think that sense of, are we comfortable in each other's space? Can Can people walk into East Belfast, or people come down into Cork or into wherever, West Belfast or whatever, likewise in parts of Dublin, and feel very comfortable about it? Can we have sporting matches where there's not any hassle or issues, different codes, and so on and so on?
And am I correct in picking up what you're saying, that there was, if I give some background to this, there was for a long time the old Republican idea, certainly in Northern Ireland, that it's a failed state, it can't work, it won't work, there's no point trying effectively, and so therefore Stormont doesn't really matter. Having good government in Northern Ireland doesn't really matter. The only way to get that is by Irish unity. Am I correct that what you're saying there is that having good government, stable government in Northern Ireland, government that works, actually maybe makes Irish unity more possible, because people from the south are looking in and saying, actually, it's not a basket case of a society?
I wouldn't use the phrase basket, I mean the general tradition, but yeah, I think politics does have to, for its own sake, work, because if it's not working in Northern Ireland, it's certainly not going to work in a broader canvas. What I'm equally saying is that it's about people, not about institutions. And as I go through my political life, I learned in education, for example, it wasn't about institutions, it's about the student. And what does that mean? Any student should be able to have a clear learning pathway, irrespective of where you attend. So it's not about Trinity versus UCD, it's about, is there a level of qualification. In health, it should be about the patient. It's still about institutions in health in the Republic. You know, remember the big row we had about Holles Street and Vincent's? That was about institutions. No one was thinking of the patient. In the north, it has to be about people. I mean, people have to be comfortable in whatever emerges. And we know the history of the northern state and all of that. We've had those arguments time and time again. And it's very interesting when you look at De Valera and Lemass, for example. They both realise this, actually. And there's some good work done historically on the Fianna Fáil response, particularly De Valera's, because he realised early on that this had to be about building bridges and reconciliation. Lemass certainly did when he visited Terence O'Neill on that occasion. And they were trying to free themselves from the rhetoric that surrounded them and from where they'd come. And in some respects, what we're forgetting here is, what would annoy me to some respects is the degree to which the Good Friday Agreement, the watershed that was, people are in almost a hurry to not acknowledge that this indeed was a watershed moment, because it wasn't just about institutions, it was also about principles, parity of esteem, really trying to reach out to the other side. The spirit was actually better in the immediate aftermath of the Good Friday Agreement than arguably it has been for the last 2 or 3 years.
Let me just ask you one final question about Irish unity. Sinn Féin says it wants a border poll by 2030. Is that realistic? Is it something you're going to plan for? Is there any sort of vague point in the future that you think that's a realistic proposition we should be planning for?
It's not. We're not planning for a border poll to 2030, and I believe the work we are doing now, making the Good Friday Agreement work, parallel with that, the shared island, which is very practical, incremental investment is the way to go. Continually engage with people. It's less attractive politically. I mean, you will notice I've never sought to trumpet the Good Friday or the Shared Island Initiative. And many of my own parliamentary colleagues sort of said to me, people don't know enough about it, or you're not broadcasting it and all of that. And there's a deliberate reason for that. Because I understand the sensitivities that you asked me in the opening question. But also, I do, like, these are easy things to call for. And I find some of the work around that, and I've met with the project from Notre Dame and so on like that, and I would be somewhat concerned with some of what I would perceive to be a contrived approach to this.
Contrived by who?
I know, but like people are saying, the end goal is this, so how do we get to the end goal? Okay. And so then everything around research and people would dispute that, but that's the sense I get at times when I engage. Whereas actually, what I witness on the stage there is that is actually the future of the island. You can put what political shape you want on it afterwards. But if you don't get to that position where you have musicians from different traditions on the stage, very comfortable in each other's skin, exploring their music and the heritage of the music, I mean, that is it, surely. I mean, politicians don't exist for political institutions' sake. Institutions don't exist for their sake. They must serve the people. And that's what I'm about. I think, and when I go and talk to sporting organisations about this, or if I have reason to, they all get it. The vast majority of middle ground opinion on the island get this. And there's been a huge response in the north. people just want to get on with this and the practicalities of it.
Let me ask you one final thing just about Trump and tariffs. You believe in the Good Friday Agreement. You were there when it was signed. It's very much at the heart of your own politics and your party's politics. And yet, isn't the truth that what Donald Trump is doing with tariffs is causing enormous difficulties for Northern Ireland, for the Northern Ireland Protocol, for trade in Northern Ireland? And you're in a position where you can't say very much about that because you are so in need of that US investment that he could try to cut off.
No, I wouldn't say that. No, okay. We would never.
Can you criticise him? We
would never be shy in identifying issues on the island in terms. In fact, one of the first issues he asked me about was Northern Ireland and how's the peace holding. He was interested in it. I use that actually as an example. Northern Ireland, the whole peace process, is an example of maybe what could happen in the Middle East. So, and he's very conscious of that, and what had happened during the violent years and so on like that. So, but we're now at 10% at the time of this interview. So, there's a journey to travel.
Maybe by the time of publication,
there is a journey to travel on this.
Thank you very much for your time, Taoiseach.
Thank you.